specifically. And I think that goes to the RDA question as well. I mean, when the representatives from the iBank said that a quarter of their business is with the RDAs and they're going to be gone, that's scary. Because the redevelopment authorities, say what you want about them, and we would probably agree with half of it because there are problems there. The money that goes into building whatever is going to be built by a redevelopment authority is going to employ local workers from locally owned contractors, which is important, which is what I think every one of you want to do. You want to direct money back to your local communities to employ local people. So I think that losing a quarter of their business is scary, and I think it screams for a replacement at the very least for RDAs. We would say we've heard it many times: mend it, don't end it. And we would support something along those lines as well. Mr. Bell's point earlier about getting them more money, I know that the state has no more money, but that will be one of our recommendations as well. I mean, $160 million has been leveraged into $421 million in total funds. That was what the iBank said earlier. I mean, that's remarkable. If only they would have started with $421 million, they would probably have leveraged over $1 billion, given that ratio there. I know that there's no money to give them, though, and it's unfortunate because this is something that the iBank is something that you can point to that actually creates jobs. We have billions, $14 billion in tax credits go out every year to corporations, and there's no oversight of that money. The iBank is oversight. They give the money out. You've got to apply for their money. You've got to report back to them. You've got to keep up with letting them know how you're spending your money. That's exactly the model that all tax credits in the state should utilize, and unfortunately, none of them do. There's no in the enabling legislation for tax credits. There's no requirement that the money be spent to create jobs. Ostensibly, that's what they're passed for, and there's no requirement that the corporations report how they use that money they get. And there's no mechanism to claw it back. With those comments about what we've already talked about, I'll get into my presentation now. I just wanted to touch on a few points. I mean, the biggest thing that the iBank does, in our opinion, is allow for leveraging, which is just huge. I'll get into some other examples later on, but one example that I have right now from our world is the Ivanpah Solar project down in I think it's Riverside County. It's out in the desert.
On the way to Blythe.
Right. Blythe, right. That's exactly right. It's 2 million, and pardon the term, 2 million man-hours of work, 2 million work hours down there to build this thing, not counting the transmission, distribution side of things and the maintenance side of things. They leveraged money from the Department of Energy to help move that project along. And the Bright Source Corporation that's going to be building the project wouldn't have moved forward with that project were it not for leveraging, the ability to leverage assets from government. In this case, it was the federal government. I think this is germane, but it's not a perfect example at the same time. This is what the iBank can do, and I think that's what they should be set up to do. From giving them more money to removing those 4 restrictions, housing, public works. I can't remember the other 2, but there was 4 they said they can't get involved in. We should make sure they can get involved in as much as they can because it's a very good idea, and it's the exact example that the state should use when giving out taxpayer dollars to do things. So I'll just talk about the building trades for a second. In our perspective on this, many of you around on the dais know that depending on the craft, we're facing 35 to 45% unemployment right now. Some of our members have not worked in 3 or 4 years. They're facing foreclosures. They're facing divorces. There have been suicides because there's just no work. And unfortunately, as we all know from past recessions and depressions, it's the construction industry that comes back last, building things, whether it be homes. We know about the home mortgage mess. That's going to take even longer to get construction back there, or be it private enterprise building buildings. building office buildings. Unfortunately, banks aren't lending, and because they aren't lending, our members and those workers who aren't in unions but do construction work, they aren't working either. None of them are working. So we need to incentivize construction. Getting back to this leveraging idea, we need to make sure the iBank is there, operating, has the staff they need to operate, has the money they to give out to make sure private enterprise has some help getting loans from banks to build things. What do infrastructure projects mean that are funded through the iBank or helped funded through the iBank? We're very happy to know and to note for you that any iBank money used for a project has to be prevailing wage, and it also has to be people who take the money have to pre-qualify for that money. So pre-qualification means filling out a form by the Division of Industrial Relations that asks you, among other things, do you have any outstanding workers' comp claims? What's your health and safety rating? Do you have any serious or willful violations of the Occupational Safety and Health Code? Do you provide health care? You pre-qualify these entities that want to take state money so that you're giving it to entities that take care of their workers. Whether it's union or non-union, there are thousands of contractors who are not union who qualify through the DIR by using their pre-qualification process because they take care of their workers. They pay them a decent wage. They pay the prevailing wage. They give them health care, et cetera, et cetera. So we're very glad that that is in there. And I'm talking about that and the prevailing wage in a second to stave off any attempts to argue that those requirements limit the ability of the iBank to get money out to people and to entities. We would wholeheartedly disagree. We think that state money that goes out to contractors to build things or to do things should go to the right contractors. By the right contractors, I do not mean necessarily union contractors. I mean contractors who take care of their workers, who follow state law, and who, play by the rules. We can have a whole hearing about the underground economy, right? Billions and billions and billions of dollars go to employers out there who are competing against good employers, but there's just no oversight. We can't get our hands on them because there's not enough inspectors in the world, I don't think, to get a hold of the underground economy. So, and a quick note about the prevailing wage. Many of you up there know what the prevailing wage is. Assemblymember Grove has a few bills to do away with the prevailing wage, so I thought it would be instructive to just say a couple words about it. The prevailing wage in San Diego County for an apprentice painter is $14.21. That's their basic hourly wage. The prevailing wage, the total wages paid to that apprentice, are $20.27 per hour. That extra $6 includes a health and welfare component, a pension component, a sick time component, a vacation/holiday component, and a training component. So they're paying $4.60 an hour for health care, 15 cents an hour into the pension, 30 cents an hour into a vacation holiday fund, 34 cents an hour back to the apprenticeship program to train the next generation of workers, and 67 cents back for various other things that make up the prevailing wage. I won't go into the entire litany of what makes it up, but the point of the prevailing wage is it's a living wage, a middle-class wage. It provides things that you, Mr. Chairman, you, Mr. Weso, myself, we all take for granted. We have jobs that give us sick time, give us vacation, give us health care. Construction workers have all those components on their check as a monetary figure, and that's how they get their sick time, so and vacation time. So I wanted to make sure that everybody up here understood what the prevailing wage means. It does not mean a union job. It does not require. It is not only paid by union shops. There are many, many jobs in this state every year that have a mix of union and non-union construction on the job site. Those jobs are all prevailing wage jobs, either because they have federal tax dollars or state tax dollars or local tax dollars. That's the requirement. And there are, as many, oftentimes non-union contractors on a job site as there are union contractors, but they're all paying the prevailing so tax dollars are going to pay workers to have a life and a livelihood. I thought it was very interesting earlier on the slide where they spoke about what the iBank funds. And I'm just going to read it again for the record. The subject headings: eligible infrastructure projects, city streets, county highways, drainage, water supply and flood control, educational facilities, environmental mitigation measures, parks and recreational facilities, port facilities, power and communications, public transit, sewage collection and treatment, solid waste collection and disposal, water treatment and distribution, defense conversion, public safety facilities, state highways, and military infrastructure. That's a tremendous list of things that they can fund. And every single one of those has a construction component, obviously. And every single one of those would put people to work. Because on construction jobs, it takes a lot of people to do it. Whether you're pouring cement, whether you're laying electrical wire, whether you're hanging iron, whether you're creating the steel to bring onto the job site, whether you're fabricating sheet metal, it's a lot to construct something, and it provides a lot of jobs, which is what we want to do right now. We want to fund things in this state through the iBank that put to work the most number of people at once. Now let me give you some examples of projects that may have fit in at some point to that list. I'm not saying these are iBank projects or projects that were funded partly by the iBank, but they are projects that could have been funded by the iBank given their list of subject headings. Since 1999, the state building trades have negotiated project labor agreements on 53 of the 55 power plants that have been built in this state. This isn't going to get into a project labor agreement discussion. I just say that because we negotiate here for the work, the construction work on these projects. Bob Balkenhorst, my boss, does that. 53 power plants equals 90 million man-hours of work. 11 million man-hours of maintenance work. It signifies a $48 billion capital investment, and those 53 power plants created 39,000 megawatts of electricity. Now, I don't think the iBank can fund power plant construction, but part of a power plant is the transmission and distribution, and that's specifically mentioned in here, something they can do. If BrightSource down at Ivanpah was able to leverage money from the iBank for the transmission and distribution part of their project, they may have, I don't know. That helps them get the funding on the front end for the construction of the power plant, or in this case, the construction of the solar field. So this is the type of work we're talking about in these infrastructure projects. Infrastructure isn't just roads and bridges and buildings, it's broadband. Mm-hmm. It's power plants, transmission distribution. It's not your father's infrastructure projects, right? If I could just use that metaphor. Another example, wind farms. There are 8,000 parts in a wind turbine. That takes a lot of people to create those parts and to put that together. So we can set aside the argument or the discussion about whether wind turbine farms are cost effective. But if you want to build one, it's going to take a lot of workers. For a 44 megawatt wind project that has 30 wind towers, that's 6,400 tons of steel and 12,000 tons of concrete. You've got to make the steel, you got to hang it, you got to fabricate it, you got to make the concrete, you got to pour it, you got to lay it, you got to transmit and distribute the electricity made by the wind farm. Those are electrical workers. I mean, it's just an endless list of types of work types, work jobs, work classifications that are required on these type of projects. High-speed rail, there's obviously no funding from the iBank for high-speed rail, but part of their subject headings is public transit, rail stations, bus, et cetera. The high-speed rail project alone, 1,500 people for train and maintenance workers, 880 people to be drivers and conductors, 1,100 people to be ticketing, security, passenger service, and management, 100 people for operations, control, and management, 440 people for track, ballast, and power systems. That's the high-speed rail. Obviously, those numbers aren't going to translate to a new rail system in downtown Los Angeles, but it just shows you what happens after the things are built. There's a lot of workers that go into running whatever the iBank has helped fund. And the high-speed rail job, I mean, 400,000 construction workers over the course of this thing is going to be an easy number to attain. It's going to take a lot of construction workers. Maybe the iBank will get involved in that at some point, I don't know. But it's just an example of the type of work that the iBank already loans out for that I just want to give you the numbers of workers on some of those projects or projects like that we're talking about. Obviously, everybody here knows about road building, bridge building. The San Francisco Bay Bridge, that was one of the things they funded. 200 million pounds of structural steel asked to be hung and created 5,000 miles of half-inch steel strands in the tension cables, 450,000 cubic yards of concrete. That takes a lot of workers to create that stuff and to hang it and to make it all work. Not to mention the operating engineers to put up the decking and move the huge, gigantic, heavy steel beams and trusses around. And then, of course, you're building roads. I mean, a road is not just laying down the road. You got to make the asphalt. You got to make the concrete. You got to make the grade proper. You got to move dirt. You got to do a lot of stuff, and so much more money can come from a small initial investment from the iBank to build something. It just is exponential. I want to just say maybe a couple more things. We agree with what Wayne said earlier about maybe expanding the size of the board. There is no labor seat on that board. There's no contractor seat on that board. There's no. Those are the people that are actually going to hire the workers that the iBank money is going to help fund. So we think it would be good to have a contractor seat on there, a labor seat from a statewide, bona fide labor organization, to help the treasurer and the director of finance, make decisions moving forward and help the iBank exist. And finally, it needs to be said again, the oversight involved with this is just tremendous, and this is exactly what, as policymakers, you want to send tax money to. There's oversight here. We know that's going to create jobs. We know the application process affords the board and the staff of the iBank a great amount of oversight over how the money goes out, which is very important. And this is actually final. Over the next 2 years, China is going to spend roughly $590 billion, 7% of its annual GDP, to construct new railways, bridges, highways, subways, and airports. California is not China, I understand that, but I think the point is still valid. Other countries are doing this infrastructure fixing, repair, creation. We need to do the same thing, and we especially need to do it now because it puts a lot of people to work for a long time. And, we just believe that this is the time for government to spend money to create jobs like this to help us get out of this economic downturn recession. So with that, I'll stop and take any questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Smith. A great presentation as well. Really appreciate it. Before we move on to public comment, any thoughts from members? Mr. Wilson? I just would like to ask if it's okay, Mr. Hazelroth, as well as Ms. Plant, what are your thoughts on some of the recommendations and ideas that came forward from members as well as from Jeremy or Wayne? If you can address some of that, that'd be great.
Well, I think there are a lot of exciting ideas, and we have had, as I mentioned before, some meetings with national groups to discuss possibilities, and I think that the idea of a task force to bring all these ideas to the table with a lot of experts involved would be a very good idea to winnow out the good things or separate the wheat from the chaff and implement a lot of those good ideas.
Well, I think we're going to move forward with that as well. I know that we have a list of recommendations, and as we were moving along in our hearing today, we've added quite a bit more, and we will be following up. And the emphasis ultimately is to ensure that we do enhance and that we refine the iBank or the eBank or whatever comes of it at the end of the day. And as well, knowing that there are some great ideas out there, proposals from members, and trying to put together a package, as I mentioned earlier, that makes sense for all of us, so that we can recover as a state, so that we can ensure that we bring in the infrastructure that's needed for us to continue to build out, whether it's clean tech, whether it's biotech, right, whether it's making sure that we bring in manufacturing or even better support our small business community. All that is going to be essential. And so with that being said, are there any comments from the public at this time? No one signed up. Now, if you prefer to write your comments, that's okay as well. And we'll be taking comments until April 20th of this year, 2011. So if you do have any ideas or thoughts, you can write them down or just give us a phone call. You can call my office. You can call Mr. Wessel's office. You can call any member in this committee call, as well as our chief consultant, Tony Simons, and staff. We're here to serve you. And so on behalf of the Assembly Committee on Jobs, Economic Development, and the Economy, I want to thank the committee members and the witnesses for participating in this informative hearing. The next JETI hearing is scheduled for April 12th, and the committee will be discussing several bills, specifically on the California iBank, and I'm hoping that you can join us at that time. And any last comment on your behalf, Mr. Wessel? Well, thank you, Mr. Wessel. You had some great ideas as well. And I think that all the ideas that were raised today are very provocative. Wayne, look forward to working with you. Jeremy, look forward to working with you. Mr. Hazelroth, look forward to working with you, as well as Ms. Plant. And folks that are out there on behalf of the members, or as well on behalf of our community, our constituents throughout the state of California, we look forward to making sure that we recover as a state and rebuild this economy. With that, I'd like to close this hearing. Thank you.
Thank you.